Okay, so I'm here with Rob and Jet, and we're talking about 9/11, the official story. And so I guess we're going to kind of jump in here. Robin, you're talking to me earlier about a gentleman. Was it Richard Gage?
Richard Gage. He's kind of the guy who kickstarted all the legitimate questions surrounding the 9/11 events in 2001.
And that's interesting because these aren't just regular people like off the street or somebody who just noticed something. These are experts, and there are a lot of them. I mean, you said earlier that they're building every day. And last time I checked, there was like a couple thousand engineers, I thought. I may be off, but I could have sworn. I mean, I just know there was a lot, and I wanted to say a couple thousand. But anyways, whatever the case, if there was 10 experts that were questioning it, it would be something people should pay attention to, right? So what are some of the things that Richard Gage talked about?
Well, in the movie, he consulted with explosive technicians, with architects and engineers, and all of these people were coming together and talking about how what they told us couldn't have actually happened the way that they told us it happened. Like, for instance, the buildings were built to withstand airplanes flying into them, but somehow two buildings side by side, one plane each flies into each one, and they both implode just like a controlled demolition. And you would think that if it was some fluke where one building would fall, but this was two buildings side by side that fell, one right after the other,
so you're
and fell straight down.
So you're talking about the two buildings, 9/11, the two buildings that fell down exactly the same, and the engineer who designed them said it could withstand that. It could withstand two jets, right?
Yes, this is standard practice for engineers to build these buildings.
And this has never happened before.
Before this, to my knowledge, it had never happened before.
And so that's why it's gotten the attention of these other engineers. But you know what's crazier than those two buildings falling down that way? Is that there was another building that the news didn't talk about. People brought it up. But not only did those two buildings fall that got hit by planes, but there was a building that was not hit at all. And that fell exactly the same as the two that were hit by planes. It fell down exactly the same, straight down. And so if a building is hit on the side or if it's hit anywhere, it's going to fall. I mean, I'm not an engineer, and I know that. And I heard the engineers say that it would fall sideways or it would fall, And so it makes no sense. And then there were people that, if you could talk about this, I'm sure you remember the people talked about hearing explosions.
I'll tell you what, let's go back to that so that I don't lose my place here. But we discussed how it's basically impossible by the design of the buildings that two buildings within an hour of each other would both fall down. Was it within an hour or longer than that? I can't remember, but it was on the same day. We know that. And they both fell down. One plane flew into one and another plane flew into another. And you would think that, okay, well, maybe one of them might implode, but both of them implode in exactly the same manner. And like you had mentioned, the World Trade Center 7, like, why in the world would that one fall and no planes hit it? How could it possibly have even caught on fire? And so one question that comes up is, why were there no military aircraft deployed during the attacks? Because early on, the planes were going off course. You know that, right? And so air traffic controllers would have known that the planes were going off course. Wouldn't that have triggered a military response if they saw that the plane was headed towards, the very least, the Pentagon? When they saw that it was headed towards the Pentagon, wouldn't there have been a military response?
Exactly. And it gets crazier because that alone is like, how could that be so? It seems impossible. And then what's also impossible is how in the world did a couple things. First one is they talked about it's going down before it even went down. The reporter, and how how
could he have possibly known that?
And they're like, it's going to go down. Like, they had insight that it was going to go down. And the other thing is, how come that there were people that didn't show up for work that day, and I'm trying to remember the details of this, but the people knew, like, they were told not to come, like that they shouldn't come to work that day, and there were big people who didn't come to work, that were up there. And it's like, there's just a lot of fishy stuff about it. And, it goes beyond, oh, this is a crazy conspiracy. And it gets into, wait a minute, these are some legitimate facts and some legitimate questions that everybody should be asking. And it's not crazy at all, really.
And you want to ask, like, why did both of these, and I don't know if there's any video footage of Building 7, but why did both of those buildings in the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, why did they both look like controlled demolition when they came down?
Yeah, along with Building 7.
Yeah, why did it look like that? And that we have to ask ourselves, like, how? I understand that jet fuel burns hot. I understand that it melts steel. I was in the Navy. I know, that once metal catches on fire, you can't put it out with anything, really. But for it to burn hot enough to bring down a whole building, it didn't make sense.
Well, what else didn't make sense that makes that not make sense more is that opening, that big gap where the plane hit. There were people waving. Like, one of the firemen inside said, "Hey, it's starting to cool down." He was talking about how it was cooling down and everything, and you had people waving their arms for help. And not long after, the whole thing went down. And so if there was that much heat, how would those people withstand that sitting there? And why did the firemen say, "Hey, it's dying down"? The thing is, the whole thing just collapsed. Like, it was like something happened after that. It with the evidence that's there, if it was that hot, those people wouldn't have stood there. So if that means, and then you have the firefighters saying it's cooling down. So with all that, that means that jet fuel, although you said it couldn't stop, it burned off.
At some point it would have burned off before it got down to the bottom. And
you're telling me that all those people were able to stand there, and then the whole thing went down, in that area, and that was one of them. I can't say for the other one, but I seen them waving right through that gap. Like, how is that?
Well, and think about this: how many fires have you seen where a building is on fire and rather than falling over, it falls straight down? Like, if it's
exactly,
that tall.
And it was hit on the side. Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever. And how would that jet fuel go all the way? It makes no sense that it could go all the way down. And even if it was another gap, I want to say it was that gap where the plane hit. But if it wasn't that gap, it was another gap that it should have been too hot for people to withstand if it's going to come down. It would make no sense if it burned that hot. And so, where did you want to move on from here?
Well, There were claims by numerous witnesses of hearing explosions before the collapse.
I heard that. And other people can verify that themselves.
And one witness, a former Air Force medic, even heard someone counting down right before he started hearing the explosions.
Really?
And this is all stuff that people can look up for themselves online.
Yeah, exactly. And what do you think about this? I mean, is there anything you want to add to that? Because I was going to add something about the owner of those buildings.
Well, that's what I was getting to next. Is the Securities and Exchange Commission? They operated out of Building 7, and they lost thousands of files on various Wall Street companies that they were investigating. And those companies, by the way, included Enron and WorldCom.
So if you could tie all this together, I was going to mention the guy who owned those buildings and how he had a big insurance claim on all of them. And it just so happens that all three fell down. Isn't that suspicious?
It is.
To where he could accept that claim. And instead of those two just falling down, all of them, and he got he got a bunch of money from that. And so can you pick up from there?
You're talking about Larry Silverstein.
Okay.
And he owned the World Trade Center Building 7, and he signed a lease for the entire World Trade Center complex in July of 2001. Remember, September 11th happened in 2001.
Isn't that weird?
So just 2 months before, he's signed a lease for the entire World Trade Center complex. Okay, so 2 months later, the planes hit, and Building 7 fell without being hit. Silverstein walked away with a $4.5 billion insurance payout.
That's something else. I mean, I don't even think we need to say anything. I think anybody who hears this is like, I mean, if they're not suspicious, they're delusional. You know, I mean, it's just crazy to not be suspicious of that, you know?
Yes. And you know, even Dan Rather, when he was reporting on when he was covering this on September 11th, even he commented that it looked like controlled demolition.
That's crazy.
And we've already discussed that chemical elements used for military demolition was found at the World Trade Center
That
site.
was before. You may want to go over that because when we had that technical difficulty.
Oh, right. Okay. So there were chemical elements used for military demolition found at the World Trade Center site. And these findings, it's not just, you know, some random expert that's bringing this up. This was actually published in a peer-reviewed journal for physics.
Really?
Called the Open Chemical Physics Journal back in 2009.
Wow. And so that's crazy. And so where do you know, just that alone is just, it really makes you think. And really, the suspicion is over. I mean, to me, that like seals the coffin, if you ask me. So what else did you want to add?
Well, the high-rise buildings are designed, I don't know if we've already discussed this, they're designed to burn slowly so that evacuees can escape in the event of fire. And the World Trade Center, both the Twin Towers, they had to meet these standards. And so it's not like there's I hope you're going to edit that out too.
Hey, we're outside, so this is live. We just do it as is. But
so it shouldn't have happened that way. That's all I'm saying. More people should have been able to get out.
Yes.
And honestly, I believe that the jet fuel should have burned off long before it did.
Yeah. And the fact that it slowed down and then things amplified, it just, you know, and the buildings fell, it makes absolutely no sense.
And just like for context, whenever I was researching this, I thought that no high rise has ever been completely brought down by fire alone. But that's not true. There was a high rise in Brazil that was brought down by fire.
Didn't it burn for days?
It burned for days. And also, remember, this was after the September 11th events. So I'm not saying that they would have created the situation to make it look like to give more credence to the September 11th.
But it's possible.
Claims, but I believe it's possible. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure the circumstances must have been a little different because, you know, look. I mean, I want to say that the buildings came down within a very short period of time.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember that day. By the time we went home, I by the time they were sending everybody home that day, I think the buildings had already come
and then
down.
the engineer, and going back to the engineer who built it said it could withstand more than what hit it, and it still doesn't make any sense.
So let's talk about the 9/11 Commission.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add about the 9/11 Commission? Have you done any research on that?
You may have to lead on that one.
Okay. The 9/11 Commission, the purpose was to investigate what happened on 9/11,
okay,
and to publish the results so that all Americans would have access to that knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, a Georgia Senator, Max Cleland, resigned from the 9/11 Commission because of his belief that the investigation was being stonewalled by the Bush administration. He is quoted as saying, "The investigation has been compromised."
Yeah, now that's damaging. But how come your average people didn't hear that? I don't think your average people heard that, did they?
No, and here's another thing. The 9/11 Commission report doesn't even mention Building 7.
Wow. And it fell down just like the others. That's very suspicious.
You want to hear... Moving on to something even more suspicious, BBC announced the collapse of Building 7 20 minutes before it actually came down.
That is really, really insane. So
that's about all that I have on the the September 11th events. And so I thought you could give some input about your own conclusions about it.
Well, I wanted to add one thing that I thought was suspicious. If you can kind of touch on this, and then we can move on to that. What do you think about them immediately before investigating anything? They immediately took all the steel and burned it down.
I didn't even know about that. I haven't researched it because I didn't know that they did that.
Yes, immediately before they can do any type of investigation, they immediately shipped it out and they melted down the metal. And I want to say they turned it into a ship. We'll have to look into that. People can look into that.
Well, Well, I'll tell you what. Just for the fact that there's so many things that you can add to this, so many suspicious things surrounding the 9/11 Commission report and the September 11th narrative. Just all of these things, maybe a few of the things could be explained away, but there's things that we have no idea about that makes it look suspicious.
And I think even all the knowledge that we have now, it's just scratching the surface. Like there's so much that was withheld from us. Like nobody knows all the insight. Like I don't think anybody knows 100% all the entire insight. All we know is all the things that absolutely are suspicious and make no sense, and that they're lying. We know for sure they're lying.
Yeah.
But we don't know. There's so much in there. I don't think anybody knows 100% all the details. And even where these, jihadists even fit in, it's just weird that they found the IDs down at the bottom. They found an ID down at the bottom. It just sounds like almost like high school. It just, I don't even understand how anybody could believe a lot of this stuff. But people are so trusting. And so where were you going to move on from there?
Well, I just wanted to express what I've concluded. Okay. It's all a mystery why they would do this. I mean, for all we know, it wasn't the government. For all we know, it was these corporations that got together, and they're so powerful that they were able to make themselves look like the government. I don't know. What I think though is that one reason they wanted to do this goes back to which president was it that talked about the military industrial complex? Was it? I want to say FDR, but
you may be right. I mean, I don't know off the top, but
it was a president from back in the day that he warned us about the military industrial complex.
And I remember the audio clip of it. Yeah.
And here's the thing. The military and the government, particularly the government alphabet agencies like the CIA, they, when it comes to the economy and what they deem national security, because they wrap the economy up with national security.
Yeah.
So if they believed that that it was for the best of our economy to maintain perpetual war, then that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. So you think it may have to do with, war?
I think it may have to do with the businesses surrounding war. I think it may have to do with Dick Cheney and the interests that he had.
I've heard other people say that, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, because obviously there is something like that behind it, and these things always happen to do that, to move people in a direction, and to shift the herd,
Yeah.
and unsuspecting people who, are well-meaning, and they have no idea that all this is going on. And but yeah, I mean, to me, like my conclusion is the same, that there's I believe there's an underlying agenda that they do these things to benefit. A lot of people benefited, but also to have different events that push us in the direction they want us. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's what's happening, because a lot changed.
Yeah.
Right after that. And so, yeah, I mean, and listeners can have their conclusion on what they think it is, but there's a lot of evidence, and I'm convinced that the official story, it could not possibly be true. And everybody else, I believe, should be suspicious too. So anyways, you want to wrap that up?
Yeah, just that I believe that they would do anything in the name of national security. It's one of those things that the ends justifies the means. And if that means killing 3,000 people, or how many people died? Was it 3,000 something?
It was something like that. And it was, they didn't, I don't believe they batted an eyelash.
No. And it was a horrible thing. And it's horrible to think it gives an American a gross feeling in their stomach, thinking that our government can do this to us. But all I know, to wrap it up, my conclusion is that what they told us isn't true.
That's where I stand too, and I'm sure a lot more feel that way, and I'm sure there will be a lot more. I hope that they they can put their conclusion together and come to put their information together and come to the same conclusion, because they don't have to. They can go and look at it themselves. We're just saving them the work.
Yeah.
Because I know we both haven't researched this at different angles. But anyways, it's been fun, for anybody who doesn't know, we're outside, because that's where we want to be,
Yeah.
We're
outside in nature.
Yeah, we're hitting our roots, aren't we?
Yeah.
But anyways, everybody, thanks for listening, and this wraps up episode 1. I'm with Robin, and this is Jeff with Jet Audio. Thanks again, and have a blessed evening, or day, or morning. Bye-bye.